Good morning, good afternoon, sorry, everyone. Thank you to everyone who's joined us for today's webinar. My name's Isabel. I'm the Head of Programs at the ILC, and I'll be chairing today's webinar. Today, this webinar is launching the ILC's new research on redefining lifelong learning we've done in collaboration with Phoenix Insights. But just before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. Internet issues may affect sound and audio, so please do bear with us if this occurs. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A feature where we will be collecting questions for the panelists. Our Q&A session will be in our last 25 minutes of the webinar today. If you're having any issues with audio or video throughout the webinar, do try to connect an internet cable or through the hotspot on your phone. If you get disconnected from the webinar at any stage, you can use the same link from your confirmation email to join again. Also, a reminder to our speakers to keep to your allotted time to ensure we have space for the Q&A at the end of our discussion. And finally, please do feel free to share on Twitter or X or tag us at ILC UK. So let's begin. As we live our longer lives, an increasing number of individuals will find themselves working for longer to ensure they have a decent income throughout their lives and into retirement. This means to be financially secure, many must now consider careers that are more extensive and diverse than we originally thought. Continuing to engage in learning and training in mid and later life is going to be vital to achieve longer working lives. But while there's a clear case for employers and for governments to invest in lifelong learning, as we age, we're still struggling to navigate and participate in learning. Through this project, we've brought together international and local perspectives on lifelong learning to understand what we in the UK need to do to ensure continuous education can be sustainable, successful, and accessible for all. During this webinar, we'll hear from experts from the UK and around the world on best practices in lifelong learning. And to begin, we have Anna, who is led on this project. So Anna joined the ILC in 2023 as our Research and Policy Officer. She holds a degree in linguistics and a degree in public policy, both from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, where she lived for 10 years. Anna previously worked in research looking at how poor healthcare policy implementation in South Africa impacts on migrants' abilities to access paediatric health services. And prior to joining the ILC, she also worked as an English teacher for those new to the language. So I'll hand over to Anna now to present our findings. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Izzy, and thank you so much to everyone who's joined today. I'm really excited to be able to share this research with everyone. So we know that we're living for longer, which does mean for many people that they'll also be working for longer. We can already see that 1 in 7 people over the age of 65 in the UK are still employed. But at the same time, we're seeing challenges with our work span and our skills utilization. So according to our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index, the UK's work span is only 31.5 years. In comparison, Cambodia has the highest ranking work span of 43.7 years. On top of this, skills shortages that are driven by demographic changes are hitting all sectors of our economy. So our previous Work for Tomorrow research showed that by 2030, we could see a shortage of up to 2.6 million workers. So we know that our employment rates and our work span really need to improve, and one way to do this is through lifelong learning. When adults continue to learn and upskill, we can see these really key benefits to individuals and to society as a whole. We see improved employment opportunities, but also a culture of learning has been linked to stronger, more competitive, and more innovative economies. But aspirations in the UK to sort of drive up this participation in learning have not yet proved successful. We can see from the graph here that as we age, our participation in learning really drops off. So what we've set out to do with this research is identify some best practices in adult learning and engagement around the world and look at what the UK can learn from this. So we spoke to 14 experts in areas like research, academia, policy influencing, and large and small scale education providers. And through these consultations and with desk research, we've identified some leaders in lifelong learning around the world and also some pockets of best practice in smaller contexts. Our key findings show that there's no one silver bullet that really solves all these issues around learning participation. While we've identified some leaders in learning around the world, all of their approaches are really different and no one is necessarily better than another. But what we can do with these approaches is draw some inspiration from countries around the world to see how we can encourage learning. We've also found that in smaller contexts in the UK, abroad, and in industry-specific cases, there are these sort of green shoots of practice or good practice in learning. But generally, the UK does face challenges with lifelong learning, and there's more that we can be doing. There's more that we can be learning from other people to improve upon. So, as I said, there's no one sort of magic fix that improves everything. What must also be remembered as we go through some of these examples is that there's a lack of evaluation on lifelong learning around the world in general. So even in countries that are perceived as leaders in learning, programs are still significantly under-evaluated. What we can see, however, is these common themes that are emerging from different countries that are often highlighted as leaders. So this is cultures, a range of opportunities, support, investment, and accessibility in our learning opportunities. So when we see a more holistic approach to primary and secondary education, this really helps to instill confidence and skills when it comes to learning. And then this expectation to continuously learn continues across the life course. In Japan, for example, independent cross-topic research projects are often carried out in schools from an early age, and integrated teaching brings together children of different ages. So there's this focus on social development as well as intellectual development. And then as people move across the life course, we can see that they continue to learn independently through community centres and adult education centres and public universities. And all of this learning is also protected and provided by national and local councils. Another theme that we found is varied opportunities for learning, including flexible and informal learning and learning supported by cross-sectoral efforts. So in the Netherlands, government partnerships with the private sector and with academic or tertiary institutions sort of form the cornerstone of adult education policies. So an example of this is the sector planning, which is a collaborative effort between governments and universities to improve learning and research. And amongst all the activities that take place in the sector planning, one of these is retraining and upskilling mid-career and older workers. By 2019, 150,000 people had been upskilled and retrained. The next key feature we can see is support. So many leaders in lifelong learning provide individuals with really effective support that helps them to identify skills gaps and navigate the best options for learning. So Germany is a great example of this. Prior learning or learning through skills instead of professional qualifications is widely recognized. And the Profile Pass initiative also offers really great support. So this is a document that helps people to sort of assess and document their skills, which then helps them to find work and training opportunities. Also in Germany, the government sponsors an online database called Course Finder, which lists free or low-cost courses from all around the country. And this government sponsorship also improves the trustworthiness of these courses for individuals. Public investment is, of course, also really important to facilitate learning. In Sweden, education is completely free, even at the tertiary level, but also barriers to learning are mitigated. So, for example, parents that want to engage in continuous education may receive free state support for childcare. In Singapore, we can also see the difference that money makes. So training vouchers valued at 500 Singapore dollars are provided to every adult to facilitate learning. And this is often carried out online to improve accessibility as well. The final common theme that we can see is accessibility. So many countries work to make sure that there's an equitable access to learning, no matter what personal barriers may be in place for people. In South Korea, for example, there are 160 lifelong learning cities, and this is where every adult has a learning center or learning provider within a 10-minute walk from their home. And the government also sponsors free massive open online courses in the Korean language, and they have an autodidacticism policy, which is where people may teach themselves a subject, take a university level exam, and if they pass, they can be awarded a degree under the auspices of the Ministry of Education. So we know that these themes are present in sort of countries around the world, but what we can also see is these similar sort of themes emerging in smaller contexts in the UK and abroad as well. We can see programs that are helping to shift the culture of learning by challenging ageism, setting expectations, and supporting inclusion. So an example of this is at the Isle of Wight Council, where nearly half of all employees are aged 50 or over, but also 1 in 5 apprentices are aged 50 or over. On top of this, there's age-friendly training and regular lunch and learn opportunities for employees to share knowledge and collaborate. We're also seeing learning opportunities being increased through community-led learning, online learning, learning by doing, and learning through fun. So a really key example of this is this idea of edutainment, which is education and entertainment. So at Deloitte, for example, the audit firm, they employ gamification to monitor training. They realized that executives weren't sort of completing assigned training. So they introduced badges and teams and leaderboards. And not only did this improve participation in training, but also the average time taken to complete training was actually halved. We're also seeing examples of increased support through community integrated learning, counselling and supervision, and AI supported learning. We can really optimize learning through AI. We know that one size fits all programs rarely work for every single person because we all have different levels of knowledge, different skill sets. But with AI, we can tailor and personalize individual trainings to make sure it's as efficient and effective as possible for each individual person. We're also seeing some inroads in state-supported learning. So in Wales, personal learning accounts offer people free training and courses and professional qualifications to help them progress in their career. The training also aims to fill skills shortages in local areas, and this improves the likelihood that individuals will find employment afterwards. And this is a relatively new program, but in 2022, we can see that over 7,000 people had been trained through these accounts. Finally, we are seeing learning and work becoming more linked. This is through support for older career switchers, partnerships for employee education, and a shift in employer attitudes. So an example of this is in South Africa. BP has a partnership with the University of the Witwatersrand, where they'll pay tuition fees for any employees who wish to study business or leadership programs. And similar successful partnerships can also be found within trade unions in South Africa. The National Union of Mine Workers helps the upskilling of miners This is a really large industry and a really large employer within South Africa. So we know there's a lot that we can learn. We can see there's a lot going on all around the world, but we also know there's more to be done in the UK. The government investment in skills is set to be about £1 billion less in 2025 than it was in 2010, while employer investment in training has fallen by 28% since 2005. So in lieu of this investment, individuals are forced to use their own resources to access learning. Individuals invest about £7.3 billion a year, or £55 billion worth of time, in their own learning, which is more than government and employers put together. And although we can see this investment from individuals, it's not equitable. We can see disparities across gender, race, and geographic location and age when it comes to learning participation. And current offerings to improve this learning participation are just really narrow. The lifelong learn entitlement, for example, is a new single funding system that should help individuals pay for college or university courses so they can retrain throughout their life. But it's limited to people under the age of 60 and people who haven't already taken out a student loan. Other significant initiatives like the apprenticeship levy haven't really yielded the results that we would hope either. So what's next? We've highlighted 4 key areas for action. This is shifting the culture around learning, increasing the diversity of learning options, helping individuals identify skills gaps and opportunities, and increasing our investment in learning. So to do this, we need to bring together policies. Currently, childhood education policies and adult education policies are just completely split. And it would make more sense to join them up and have a life course education policy. We can also increase the range of learning options by supporting more cross-sector efforts. This will also encourage innovation in education. To help people find the right type of learning for them, we need services that can offer free and trusted advice. This could either be through new services, or we could expand the remit of the Adult Careers Service and Job Centre Plus. And finally, we need to reduce cost barriers. This is obviously quite a large undertaking, but first steps for this can include widening the eligibility for the lifelong loan entitlement, and also developing more personalised learning accounts based on that model that was established in Wales. There's no one key fix, but there are definitely some steps that we can take to accelerate the UK's efforts to improve learning. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna, and some really insightful things there. We're now going to hear from some experts in the UK on the importance of lifelong learning and the challenges we're facing locally. So first we have Shani Wilson, who's the Policy and Research Manager at Phoenix Insights, a longevity think tank which aims to transform the way society responds to the possibilities of longer lives. Shani's work focuses on better work, career changes, lifelong learning and skills. She previously worked in the civil service for 4 years across government departments, championing social policy and effective change for all in the UK. Thank you, Shani.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabel. And thank you so much to the ILC team as well. I'm really pleased to be here and to be collaborating with the ILC on this piece of research. So as Isabel mentioned, so Phoenix Insights, so we're a longevity think tank, and we're set up to transform the way society responds to the possibilities of longer lives. And we're part of the wider Phoenix Group, which is the UK's largest long-term savings and retirement business. And so with all of this in its context, if we're thinking about in an aging UK where over 1 million workers are aged over 65, people are living longer, and many people may actually need to work for longer than previous generations. Gone are the days of a career for life, and it is now widely accepted that for many of us, the ability to change roles, to reskill, and to switch sectors is becoming increasingly important. The workplace is evolving now, and I think investing in skills and development is needed now more than ever to improve employment opportunities and to remain in good, fulfilling work for longer, and ultimately to help people save more for the future. As Anna has helpfully pointed out, currently the UK's approach to lifelong learning, I think we could all agree, is quite fragmented, and it feels quite inaccessible to many people who don't necessarily know what is accessible to them, or might not even know how to gauge how it's useful for them, for their lives and for their careers. And so research by the Learning and Work Institute actually found that 49% of UK residents over the age of 17 reported having engaged with learning in the past 3 years, but only 36% of those aged 55 to 64 had actually done so. So the lack of investment post-compulsory education is quite telling, and there's few options actually available to older workers. One of the most interesting findings that I found from the report was around Skills Future in Singapore, which is a dedicated arm's length body committed to lifelong learning and skills. And Skills Future has actually just launched their mid-career support package, which provides designated funds for citizens over 40 to support with courses to pursue a skills reboot and to help them stay relevant in a changing economy. And while we might not actually have that luxury of such wide investment in the UK, there's also attitudinal, cultural, and practical barriers to learning. And these sometimes stem from ageism and to stereotypes, and sometimes from employers who may fail to actually see the benefits of investing in older workers against graduates and young professionals. And this is why I think this research is actually so important to policymakers, to government and businesses, as it explores the potential solutions to embed lifelong learning throughout society and the workplace by learning from other countries' examples from across the globe. And just quickly drawing on some of the work that we've done in the Phoenix Group. So last year we actually held a jobs fair for those aged over 50 in Edinburgh alongside the Job Centre Plus and DWP. And the fair attracted recruiters from across the financial sector, showcasing a huge number of vacancies available and the skills that are actually in demand within the sector. I actually went along, and speaking to attendees throughout the day, we found that many were really interested in reskilling, to get a new job, and to work with recruiters and coaches to actually help them to find job opportunities. So I think this tells us that it's not just about providing access to jobs via a fairer recruitment process, but kind of going one step back to help those who have been out of the job market to reskill, to retrain, and take up learning opportunities to be able to apply and actually thrive in our evolving workforce. So overall, I feel like people need lifelong learning, but they also need to know how they can match that to their careers they need over their longer lives. And our research showed that 44% of adults actually would be really interested in getting information about careers options, and yet the same proportion had never thought about getting this careers advice previously. We also did some research with Ipsos Mori, and we found that transferable skills are actually important to a quarter of adults who would find information about how their skills can be useful in different jobs quite useful. So we know that there is some appetite. And so just to give a little bit of a conclusion, so I feel as though we can provide a far wider range of ways for people to learn throughout their lives. And clearly this will be vital if we want to widen participation in learning, and if we want to ensure that workers have the right skills to support the UK economy. And there are huge opportunities to sort of weave all of the different learning opportunities across the sector in the UK, drawing on businesses, technology, and traditional learning providers, community organisations, as well as sort of empowering individuals to learn independently, I think.
Great. Thank you so much, Shani. There's some really interesting insights there, particularly the jobs fair. I think like the report says, and like your findings at the job fair, the interest is there. It's just about making sure people understand how to navigate the system and what's accessible and what actually they need to do to get to that next step. But next up, we have Chris Butcher. So Chris is a senior policy manager at the WEA. WEA is an adult education charity working across England and Scotland with the mission of bringing adult learning within reach. Chris has been with the WEA for 8 years, leading on engagement with Westminster and Whitehall, including providing secretariat support for the all-party parliamentary group for adult learning. Prior to his time at WEA, Chris worked in senior policy roles for the Big Lottery Fund, the Local Government Association, and for health and arts charities. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction to myself and to the WEA. The WEA supported around 30,000 learners last year. And in fact, we celebrated our 120th anniversary last year as well. We support adult learners from the age of 19 upwards, mostly through short courses, which might be face-to-face or online. Some of those courses lead directly to qualifications, while others are for personal development and enjoyment. So thank you for sharing the findings from the new report, which I think will be an excellent resource for practitioners and policymakers in the UK. And I'd just like to share a few reflections on the report from a WEA point of view. So I think the international comparisons are really, really interesting. And I think we can particularly learn from countries with higher participation rates than the UK. So Canada, for example, which I'm very pleased wasn't covered in the earlier slides, so that's helpful, where 60% of adults are recent learners. Now this compares to around, as we've just heard, about 50% of people in the UK, although actually that falls to about 28% if you look at the people who are currently learning very recently. And yet when you look at the success factors in Canada, they appear to be very similar to a lot of the approaches that we already have in the UK, but just with better investment, essentially. So, for example, provincial strategies, which here might sort of read across to the regional mayoral authorities who are increasingly responsible for skills and adult education. Secondly, reference there to familiar learning organisations who are known in their local communities. I mean, that kind of community learning of the type that's delivered by charities such as the WEA or by local authority providers is really important in England. And yet it's the type of provision which is often hardest hit by lack of investment. Charities such as the WEA are very well embedded in communities, and those who participate often feel a fierce loyalty to their courses, to their tutors, and to the organisations which put them on. The Canada example also talks about national government programmes which are strong on inclusivity and on information, advice and guidance. And certainly more can be done in the UK to tackle educational inequality, which often starts in school and runs through later life. And more can be done to promote adult education and its benefits. Certainly recent government publicity campaigns here with very prominent advertising have been welcome, and we'd like to see more of that. The report recognises some of the characteristics of good practice in the UK and says, and I quote, "This practice is only emerging." Well, if I may say so, some of the most effective community practice has in fact been around for decades, as I said earlier, 120 years in the case of the WEA. But I think as a sector, we do need to get better at capturing and explaining the impact of adult learning. So at the WEA, we hope we do this through our annual impact report. This is a survey of around 3,000 learners, and I hope we'll circulate a link to this as part of the post-conference package. So we know that this report is well regarded within the Department for Education. And one of the things that the report we hope shows is the importance of a broad curriculum, giving learners choice, which then enables them to achieve a wider impact, what we call the ripple effect. And we feel that funders and policymakers could be more receptive to this. So we're hopeful, for example, that the Department for Education's approach to outcomes and what they will fund on the basis of those outcomes will recognise this broader impact. So not just employability, but health, community participation, volunteering, and so on. So another factor of this broad curriculum is that it allows for what the report refers to as, and again, I quote, stealth learning. The report also talks about gamification. So in other words, finding what motivates someone to learn and what they enjoy. Well, this has long been a characteristic of adult community learning. So for example, embedding literacy, numeracy, or digital skills into course design, such as, for example, weights and measures in cookery as a means of improving numeracy, or digital skills when a learner uploads their photos while doing a photography course. This is when the learner begins to see a purpose where previously maths or digital may have been an abstract thing to them. But this kind of learning can only really continue if funders are able to recognise that wider impact. One would hope the photography course would attract funding its own right, but maybe it needs that outcome relationship before funders wake up to the impact it can have. So finally, a few words about longevity. So older learners are more prominent in community learning. UK participation rates generally show a drop-off in learning through the age range. Again, as we've just heard, you're more likely to be in learning if you're younger, if you're in work, and if you're better off. But community-based learning bucks this trend. So around 35% of WA learners are over the age of 60. And this compares to just 13% of WA learners who are in that 19 to 29 age bracket. So community learning is very good at engaging people in those older age brackets, but it's also good at engaging disadvantaged and marginalised groups and communities. So organisations such as the WA support higher percentages of learners who, for example, have low or no qualifications, or who might be unemployed or economically inactive, or who might live in disadvantaged postcodes. So if educational inequality is to be tackled, then a community learning approach with an understanding of the economic, attitudinal, and structural barriers appears to be part of the answer. So in conclusion, supporting community-based learning, increasing participation, supporting that broad curriculum to achieve greater impact, reducing educational inequality, and especially making learning fun and meaningful for adults throughout life. We feel that all of this would be better served in England if it had a national lifelong learning strategy. So this would help central government to work more closely with the devolved regional authorities, with clear roles for each, and delivery which is as close to the local learner as possible. It would cultivate a culture of learning, we've already heard about that, where learning is the norm, and it would raise the profile of adult learning so that potential learners would know what's available to them and where to find it. It would also assist the education department to make better links with other departments, recognising that broader impact on health or employment or participation in cultural events. So potentially resources and funding could be drawn down from across Whitehall, not just in the education department. And as the report points out, other countries, including, I have to say, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, are already well advanced on some form of skills or learning strategy. So we have a general election coming here, and it would be great to hear the contending parties say that they will introduce a new lifelong learning strategy, which includes all forms of learning, including community learning, to assist and support communities across the country. So thanks for sharing the report and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Chris. Some wonderful insights there, particularly about the inequalities, which I know we have some questions already in the chat about, so we might be coming back to you later in the discussion. Just our final UK expert we have today is Caroline Waters, OBE. So Caroline has a background in HR, equity, diversity and inclusion and transformation with over 30 years experience as a senior executive, in large and complex organisations. She has experience in influencing governments and creating legislative change and routinely works with policy advisors. She was the Deputy Chair of the UK's Equality and Human Rights Commission from January 2013 to January 2023 and is currently the Vice President of Carers UK, Age Irrelevance Ambassador and a member of the Churchill Fellowship Advisory Board. Prior to that, she was the Director of People and Policy at BT. Thank you for joining us today, Caroline.
Thank you. I've long felt actually that lifelong learning for all should be viewed as a core principle of any democratic society. So a big thank you to ILC and to Anna and the team for this important report. I think it gives us a formula with real-time global examples of what works, offering a clear picture of what needs to happen now to change the UK experience of learning and make the habit of lifelong learning an imperative for the future health of our nation. Clearly, we need a major mindset change and some joined up thinking for government. Oh dear. We need policymakers and, very importantly, leaders at Treasury that can imagine what a holistic end-to-end lifelong learning service looks like and the value it will deliver in economic and social terms. Cross-sector investment and public-private partnerships are needed to build a pathway that is demonstrably open to anyone and everyone and extends through formal education from pre-primary right the way through to adult learning. I'd love to see a passport that accompanies us on our way through that system. But we live in volatile times, making a commitment to long-term planning and budgeting a difficult ask. But this infrastructure is absolutely essential for a future that delivers an informed and engaged populace, a strong economy and thriving problem-solving communities. Releasing the lifelong learning dividend must be a priority for any forward-thinking government or business, particularly in an election year. Of course, for it to have wide reach, we need to make it easy to access, affordable, innovative, and as Chris was saying, a really fun experience too. In this country, we have a linear concept of life with childhood associated with learning and qualifications. Adult life largely characterised by work, parenting and caring. An older life, especially post-retirement, well, framed by very little actually. We need to develop a zigzag approach to life where learning is central to every stage, extending our careers, helping us develop life skills and the essential attachment skills to community and place that will prevent loneliness or lack of purpose. So we must consider the shape and style of learning experiences. Not only must they overcome previous negative experiences, they must also be affordable, accessible and accredited. If we remain in joined up thinking mode, it's evident that while the what is important, place also matters. Online options, yes, of course, but learning in the community can build community and may help us bring new purpose to much loved infrastructure from libraries to religious institutions. A fund for life could be constructed to work a bit like a personalised learning account, giving assurance of funding and confidence in the quality of the learning experience, perhaps through an eBay-esque rating system openly available to every potential learner. Time to access learning is a harder barrier to address, given the challenges of average everyday life with work, domestic chores, caring, fatigue, and all the other complexities of modern life. For parents, carers, older and disabled people, the loss of local services can be a catastrophic barrier to engagement with learning. So we also need to consider how to motivate or incentivise people and learning partners to have the desire and stamina to engage with learning throughout life. Business talks about people as their competitive advantage. However, that means it's business's duty to maximise profit by reducing the cost of that advantage. Consequently, the link between educational attainment and earnings is being eroded. It's further accelerated by a glut of graduate entrants to the labour pool. The laws of competitive economics are reducing the value of these roles, and already we see about a third of grads working in non-graduate roles. We have constructed an artificial hierarchy around learning. We have to relearn that it's okay to develop plans around personal goals, interests and aspirations, if that helps us engage with learning through life. HR people like me talk about making workers the best project manager or leader they can be. But we also have a clear business case and a moral duty to help create the best citizens we can. It might even go a small way to restoring trust in business. We have been very poor as a nation, and perhaps globally, from what you were saying earlier, at measuring the impact of learning interventions. No wonder employers complain that it's expensive and that return on investment is hard to prove. But that's why in tough times, when we need training the most, training is often the first budget line to be sacrificed. Many organisations spend 50 to 100% of their training budget on induction and mandatory health and safety training. Now that leaves little to invest in keeping technical or soft skills up to date. And in fact, I think the UK is particularly poor here, with employers spending less than half of the UK average on learning. This report gives us a great deal to build on and a great deal of hope. We now have a blueprint on what works. We're clear about the barriers we face, and we know why access to lifelong learning is the key to better individuals, businesses, communities, and nations. I guess the big question is how to make the case and secure a commitment to action across government, business, and citizens alike, because this has to be a partnership to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Some really interesting insights there, particularly from a business perspective, and where there might be some barriers as to why businesses aren't investing in lifelong learning for their employees. Our next part of the webinar, we're going to be looking at some learning from around the world and what we can learn from other nations. First, we'll be hearing from Marie-Louise Koch, a digital learning expert at the Leiden Academy. Marie-Louise develops digital and blended learning programs and is also a program manager and learning specialist for a number of European partnerships educating professionals. With over 20 years' experience, she has immersed herself in online learnings and launched a tool to the market for secondary education. She's published a massive open online course on edX for the Scientific Knowledge Institute, Leiden Academy, on vitality and ageing. Thank you, Marie-Louise.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Marie-Louise, and I'm a digital learning expert. And could get a thumbs up if my screen is showing? Yeah. So I work at a small scientific knowledge institute in the Netherlands. So you see here my colleagues. It is Leiden Academy on Vitality and Aging. And our mission is to improve the quality of the life of older people. Each year we select also a role model to feature in all our publications. So you see here a few of our role models throughout the years. We do this to increase knowledge about aging and vitality. And we have different target audiences in which we do research, but also develop educational programs. So there's policymakers or healthcare professionals, but also for people like you and me, the citizens, the general public. And this is a beautiful quote. I don't know if it's visible, but it's by Michelangelo at a later age. I'm still learning. So this is what we are talking about today. But first, I would like to give you a little bit of context on the Netherlands. We have about 6 million people over 55, and that is over 30% of our population. We have 18 million people living in the Netherlands. And what is good to know, because I develop a lot of digital learning, educational programs, online learning, that we have a very high penetration in the households of the usage of internet. So you see here the two age groups, which are nearing to 100% daily usage of internet. And also, if we talk about the more than digital skills in the Netherlands, and by more than basic, I mean people can search for information, they're digital literate, they communicate online, they can go to a web shop and order something, use computers, software, they're aware about their privacy protection. And this is nearly half of the age group of 55 to 56 years do have this more than digital skills. So that gives us a good idea on if we can deliver online learning to get a bigger scale instead of reaching people and get them to the classroom. So even at a later age, till 75, that is nearly 30%. Also, what I like to keep in mind is how the brain ages throughout life. If you have knowledge of this, you can deliver a good educational program. So if we look at the core molecule in learning, in memory of the brain, this is the BDNF, that is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And the BDNF mainly ensures the plasticity of the brain. So making new connections between neurons while learning things, transmission and strengthening of new connections. And with aging, the level of this BDNF decreases. So the number of synapses decreases, the gray matter shrinks, and the number of signals decreases. So, but until we die, the BDNF, the plasticity is still there. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still learn. So it's never, the saying is never too old to learn. So, but it's good to have some knowledge of the cognitive science in designing educational programs and also in teaching. I would like to show you a few examples from Leiden Academy in practice. What we, for instance, do is we use role models in our videos for healthcare professionals. So you see here an example of older people taking care of older people. And they really like it that they see role models of their own age. It's very different than looking at a video of young people. Like in the introduction was said, I created a MOOC on a international platform. So worldwide participants were 16,000, of which were more than 1,000 participants in the Netherlands. And the average age of our participants were 69 years old. It was 70% female, and 88% showed this interest in healthy aging, wanting to learn more. The oldest participant was over 19 years old. And what we found astonishing was that 74% was a first-time user of an online course. They've never done anything online before in their life. But if you explain how the introduction of a course works, how people have to log in and how they can take part in discussions, there was no problem at all. We received from over the 16,000 participants only one telephone call of somebody who didn't know where to start, but everybody found his or her way. Another very good example, we created a game. This was a course on healthy aging and digital skills for low literate older people. So you see here, we developed some cards on which they can play together and do some exercises together and learn how to use their phone or an iPad, a tablet or computer. And I would just like to show you a few seconds in a video just to see how people interact with each other. It's in Dutch, but it's only music and a video, in just a few seconds. You get an idea of this learning strategy where two or more people learn and try together. They play a game, and it's a very effective way for all the learners. They get engaged, they are relaxed, but still focused. They build self-confidence. They have this positive experience. They meet up with each other, and it helps them to learn digital technology faster and more successfully. It is a faster acceptance, and they increase knowledge on this adoption. And the last example, which I would like to talk about, is a blended program. It's called Silver Starters, where people over 50 years old have an idea to start their own business. And we teach them the skills throughout 8 modules, so about 8 weeks of training. And it's both, so it's blended, so it's an online is like 80% of the whole program, and then 20% is offline. So we have a kickoff meeting offline and a final event offline, but the rest is all online. And this is really to get them where, we talked about upskilling and reskilling. So this is about entrepreneurial skills. And I talked about role models. We start the program with this role model. You see here a picture of the founder of Starbucks. He founded Starbucks at the age of 51. And this is a perfect example of a woman in the USA who started all kinds of different, on locations, bodybuilding fitness center. At a later age. This was her second career, as we say. So in the Silver Starters program, more than 80% loved that they were part of a team and they could coach each other, and they really like to share their own life experiences, their own expectations, their own opinions. And after taking part in these 8 weeks, nearly 70% said they were more self-confident, more active, 85%, and better prepared for the future. We had this learning strategy of adaptive learning. And just to show you a bit, a linear learning path is when you start learning and you go through all the contents and then finish up after 8 weeks. But we also offered an adaptive learning part where people could take a quiz or a test and then skip some content and go really fast through the content to finish. And this is what all the learners really like. It's an effective learning design because it's a flexible curriculum and it's self-paced. They can do it in their own time. And also the informal environment of meeting up with peers, although it was online, it was really interesting for them. So that was my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marie-Louise. Really appreciated that. Our next speaker is Jun Sato, a Senior Research Fellow from the Japan Center for Economic Research. Jun joined the Japanese Economic Planning Agency, which later became the Cabinet Office in 1978. As a government economist, he's held senior positions including the head of the Office of Economic Analysis and the Director General for Economic and Fiscal Analysis. He worked under secondment for the International Monetary Fund for the JCER. He has taught at the Keio University and at the International Christian University, and he has a Bachelor and Masters of Economics from the University of Tokyo and a Master of Philosophy in Economics from the University of Oxford. Thank you, Jun.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm going to talk briefly about the economic benefits of lifelong learning in Japan and how we can make the most of it. As you know, I'm an economist. I'm not an expert on lifelong learning, but I hope I can make some contribution to the discussion. As you may know, the compulsory education in Japan is a primary school and lower secondary school. And so high schools and universities, of course, are not compulsory. But as you can see, the enrollment rate to high schools are almost 100%. It's about 99%. And enrollment to universities are about 60%. So there are many people or students who are going on to higher education. But interesting thing is that taking the example of university entrance by age, for instance, you can see that the university entrants are mainly 18, 19 years old, which means that those who are going to upper schools goes to upper schools right after their graduation. So as you can see, the older generation do not go to universities. So you may wonder whether what the older generations are doing. But it doesn't mean that they're not being involved in education or training. In Japan, the training of employees are done mainly by the firms or the employers. As you may know, in Japan, we have a lifetime employment system, and we call those workers who are under lifetime employment system the regular workers. But as you can see, the plants offers regular workers with a planned training of JT and on JT. And this is because although the firms are going to bear the cost of training of the workers, they know that the workers will stay long enough in the firm so that they can recoup the cost which has been paid by the employers. So in Japan, the firms have been providing training to their employees until retirement age, basically. Now, the recent changes are making things difficult. As you can see, the share of regular workers are becoming less, and those who are non-regular workers are increasing. Non-regular workers are part-time workers and fixed-term workers, and so they don't stay at the firm for long enough. So in those cases, the firms will not provide training because they may not be able to recoup the cost that is required if they train these workers. And also another problem that we are facing is the computerization or automation. There's a famous paper by Frey and Osborne from Oxford, which says that 47% of the workers in the United States may be substituted by computers. Now, similar estimate has been done for Japan, and it says that 49% will be substituted by computers. And in the case of UK, 35%. Lower, but still significant number is going to be substituted by computers or robots. Now, that's going to create a problem for workers because so what can they do after they lose their jobs? Now, of course, a computerization and AIs will not only destroy jobs, but they will create jobs. And this is something that we need to bear in mind. It's not just destroying jobs, but they will create new jobs. Or otherwise, we have gone through a number of industrial revolutions, but how can we still have jobs? That means that, this industrial revolution will create jobs. And so we have to bear in mind. But still, in the case of middle school workers, they will be losing jobs. And so the important thing is, I'll skip this, that we need to update our skills so that we will be in line with improvement in technology, and we can be employed by the new employers and get a job. So I think the education and training after graduation from schools is very important, and I think lifelong learning is very important. Now, two observations about how we can deal with this kind of a situation. And these observations come from Japan. But firstly, I think in order to promote lifelong learning, I think the workers need to have a willingness to work. Unless people do not have willingness to work, I don't think that people will have enough incentive to engage in lifelong learning. Now, this is labor force participation rate of the aged 65 or over, but it shows that in the case of Japan, 25% of those elderlies are participating in labor market. They're either employed or looking for a job. So they are still in the labor market. And in order to get a job in the labor market, they will have to update their skills. Now, compared to Japan, UK's labor force participation rate is low. And maybe you can think of what you can do with this. This is one observation. Now, in the case of Japan, in order to support the willingness to work, there has been a number of policy initiatives. First, retirement age has to be set at age 60 or over. In Japan, we have a compulsory retirement age, but it has to be 60 or over. And since 2013, it has become mandatory for employers to provide their employees stable employment opportunities until they reach 65. And since 2021, since 3 years ago, employers are now asked to make efforts to provide employees with working opportunities until they reach 70. So they have opportunities. The elderly are facing opportunities. And that creates an incentive for them to get educated or get trained. The second point I would like to make is that how we can finance this education or training. Well, in the case of Japan, we have an education and training benefit system. This is in place since 1998. But if a worker has been a member of the employment insurance for a certain period of time, a part of the cost of education or training in designated courses can be subsidized. Employment insurance is an arrangement which provides unemployment benefits. So it's publicly funded, and it's managed by the government. But since the unemployment rate in Japan is low, there isn't much unemployment benefit being paid. So there are some room for financial assistance from this employment insurance system to get people get trained and educated. So there are a number of programs, but the cost of the educational training could be subsidized by 20% to up to 70%. And as a result, the number of recipients has been increased together with a number of courses which has been increased. So there is more eagerness to get trained because of this kind of a financial arrangement. And finally, I would like to show you this slide. This is the entrance, the university entrance by age. I said that the elderly do not participate so much. It was almost negligible. But if you look at the change in the percentage, in the percentage change of the number of enrolled university entrants by age, you can see that the middle-aged and more aged people are now participating in university education more and more. So I think these kind of arrangement is something that worth looking for in other countries as well. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, June. Finally, we'll be hearing from OECD economist Andrew Atkin. Andrew has been an economist in the Ageing and Employment team in the Skills and Employment Division Directorate for Employment, Labour and Social Affairs at the OECD since early 2022, and has since worked on reports on employment, retention and jobs mobility amongst older workers. Prior to joining the OECD, he worked at the National Institute for Economic and Social Research in London, and he holds a PhD in economics from Royal Holloway University of London. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Isabella, and thanks, Anna. So thanks for inviting me to the launch of this report, and let me congratulate you on this report. It's a very, very valuable report on a crucial topic in this time of rising longevity at older ages. So Anna asked me to share some examples of training practices for older workers. So that's what I'm going to do. Before I get to that, though, I'm just going to briefly share some statistics on employment and participation in training for different age groups to give you a brief overview. So, I mean, this is a slightly different picture from what June was just showing, but this is employment rates by skill levels. So in recent decades, across OECD countries, we have seen significant increases in the employment rates for both mid-career, 45 to 54, and older, 55 to 55 to 64 workers. But there are still substantial employment gaps once across countries and also across different socioeconomic groups, including skill groups, which is what is shown in this graph here, and other dimensions as well, for example, gender. So in this graph, you can see that low-skilled workers are less likely to be employed compared to middle school and high-skilled workers. So the next slide just shows you the share of adults who participate in training. So obviously there's a wide range of reasons, which there isn't time to get into now, about for these differences in employment rates at different skill levels. But obviously participation in training is quite an important factor. And across age groups, as June just mentioned, we see very big differences in participation in training from OECD data in different age groups. So the purple boxes are age 55 to 65 compared to the 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. And differences across countries. So what holds back participation and training of older workers? There's a variety of surveys that try to look into this. This is from some, again, PEAC data, which is the survey of adult skills. So the top barriers include time constraints, shortage of time, both work-related and then personal time, as well as financial constraints, and just the inconvenience of the time and place of training. So this suggests that employers, there's a key role for employers to really step up to the plate and offer more training during work time, obviously to overcome the barrier of not enough time during work. And so now I'm just going to turn to 3 examples. 2 are from employers that we recently come across in other work that we're doing. And then I'm going to talk about 1 example from a government policy. So this first example, the point is that both companies and governments around the world are taking action to really try and improve the skills and training of older workers. So 1 example is called Built to Shift. This comes from BNP Paribas in Portugal. And so it's a proactive program which is aimed at updating the skills of experienced workers. So those workers have got at least 15 years of working experience and at least 4 years at BNP Paribas. And the point is really to try and make sure that their skills remain aligned with the changes in the banking industry that are happening due to the application of artificial intelligence and also the growing emphasis on environmental sustainability. So the program centers around an 8-week, it's an 8-week training program, which is centered around 3 pillars, which are trends, tools, and skills. I'm not going to go into all the details here. There isn't time, but the tools pillar includes training on essential digital skills. And it also includes a big focus on developing soft skills. So this is things like critical thinking, empathy, and effective communication. So, briefly, some of the key lessons that they've learnt from this is just the importance of not jumping in and assuming that you know what the answer is when you're trying to set up such a program. So they spent a lot of time really engaging with their employers over a period of time, doing some pilots to really try and understand exactly what it was that older workers needed and wanted. And they're also engaged some external partners as well. The program was quite reactive. It remained quite reactive to the needs of workers. Thanks, Anna. So another program comes from Schneider Electric. This was a program which was introduced in 2021. It's called the Senior Talent Program. And again, this aims to strengthen the skills of employees in the later stages of their careers. So the basic approach emphasizes, Schneider is a very large multinational operating in many countries. So their approach really emphasizes the importance of having a global framework in which they provide a lot of clear criteria, but they also leave a lot of room for flexibility for local countries to develop and deploy specific initiatives that are relevant to workers in their country. And so the global toolbox includes quite a wide range of initiatives. It includes things like career conversations, a knowledge transfer program, career pivots, as well as more flexible working opportunities, different contractual arrangements. So one thing I should say is with respect to the BMP program and also this senior talent program, I mean, they have done some internal monitoring of these. There isn't really any what I would consider a robust quantitative evaluation of these programs yet. They are fairly new, but certainly the qualitative results suggest that they are quite having quite a positive effect. But the other point to make is things like career conversations, flexible working arrangements. I mean, these are things that there does exist quite a large, robust stock of evidence on the effectiveness of these kinds of things. So one of the lessons they learnt was just the importance of having a very clear narrative and a very positive narrative around the value of having 5 generations in the workforce, a corporate, and this included a corporate strategy. So just having that corporate leadership. I mean, it's not something that was just, excuse me, done from HR, but it really had corporate leadership and buy-in, which was quite important. And also just giving flexibility to local officers. And the other thing is just recognizing the diversity among older workers. I mean, older workers are not all the same. So turning to my last example, this is again a fairly new policy from Australia. I think it was introduced first in about 2021. So this is quite a specific form of training assistance, and that it's called the career transition assistance, and so it's targeted at workers 45 and above. The focus is on people who are planning to transition from whatever they're doing to something else, and the focus is on really improving digital literacy. But the program is centered around a tailored career assessment. And it includes the development of a detailed career pathway plan for workers. So it's quite a lot of one-on-one support for workers who participate in the program. So the digital literacy part includes things like, I mean, some very basic things: creating and editing documents on a computer, using smartphones and tablets, applying for jobs online, this sort of thing. And again, there hasn't been a formal econometric evaluation of this program, or not that I'm aware of. But again, qualitative evidence does suggest that it's been quite effective. And one of the things that it's showing to be quite effective in doing is actually building confidence in workers. So I think somebody's already mentioned the importance of confidence. And there's a lot of research about just how important that is for older workers if they're trying to make a job or career change later on in life. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. For the last part of our webinar, we'll be taking some questions that have been popped in the chat box and earlier when people were registered to our speakers. So the first I'd like to ask probably focuses on a bit what Chris was talking about previously, and Anna, I know, is mentioned in the report, which is about how can we make sure that the practices that have been identified by our speakers here today and in the report how can they be best adopted to make sure that our marginalised communities and people from diverse cultures can participate in lifelong learning? Maybe you start and then we'll fire to Chris.
I'll start with thanks, Izzy. So one thing that we found which applies to marginalised groups but also just to everyone across the board as a bottom-up approach is really useful. just asking people what they actually want and need as opposed to dictating. And this is especially important with marginalized groups, especially in countries where there might have been a history of oppression, places like Australia and South Africa, where we did have those sort of oppressive systems on Indigenous people in the area. So we found in our research, speaking to people from Australia, that understanding the contexts that marginalized groups live within and have lived within in the past is really important when we think about offering education. And when we understand the context, we can also sort of avoid the savior complex that sometimes comes out when we talk about marginalized communities. So I would say bottom-up approach and understanding context.
And anything for you to add there, Chris?
I mean, it's that pretty much is at the heart of it. I mean, I would say sort of three things really. So one, being embedded in communities, so making sure that the provision is, you know, within the community itself, not parachuted in or anything of that nature. So for example, WEA courses, the average distance travelled to a WEA face-to-face class is probably less than 2 miles, 2 or 3 miles. So, you know, it's that very localized approach. So that's one thing. And the second thing is sort of multiple entry points. So again, it's back to that broad curriculum thing. So not just offering a very small, narrow set of provision, but offering as wide a choice as you possibly can, informed, as Anna said, by what the community actually needs and wants. So, you know, those two key concepts, I think, is why community learning has that element of, like I say, supporting people who are perhaps disenfranchised by other parts of the education sector.
Thanks, Chris. Another theme that's come up quite a bit today is AI, and whether AI is a threat or an opportunity for both workers and for lifelong learning, and how we can ensure it's embraced by all people of all ages in learning, but also by employers and people educating us. So I thought maybe Marie, Louise, if you had any thoughts from your perspective as someone who's been training a lot of people online for many, many years, whether you think AI is a threat or an opportunity to lifelong learning.
Well, I'm an optimist, so I see a lot of opportunities, but I would say realistically both. I think for people, we talked about low-skilled people, or maybe people in the more practical jobs in their lives, like plumbing or building, construction industry. It could be like a great increase of their salary, maybe, because knowledge workers like legal or working in notary or real estate, something, or even knowledge workers like we all are, their hourly rate could be a little bit lower, maybe, because AI, artificial intelligence, could do a lot of those tasks. I do believe that we have to educate everybody in the population on this new phenomenon. And that also means the low literate people, or people with low digital skills, people who want to be blindsided, they don't want to hear about it. We definitely have to take everybody on board, because this is changing the world. It is, like social media and internet changed the world. AI is here to stay, and it could be like, a huge threat even to the world population, but let's not go there. So I'm optimistic, and I would say it definitely gives us a lot of new opportunities, but we have to get everybody on board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Anna, I know in the report a big part of it, or there's a section that talks about gamification in engaging people online.
Yeah, actually, we organize in the Netherlands, or I organize a lot of practical workshops for people just to see how ChatGPT works, how Midjourney works, building your own GPT. So it's really important, yeah, to get on board with that.
Absolutely. And do you think, I'm opening this up to everyone who's on the panel, where do we think like internalized ageism, when we're looking at learning online and learning more broadly, is a real feature and barrier in terms of people learning throughout their lives?
Yeah, we see it like, it's called self-ageism, where people internalize the ageism. I'm old, I cannot do this. Sometimes it's also very easy to go there because they're not internally motivated to learn or to work. Use it as an excuse, maybe. But also the downside is that people who can do anything but are not self-confident anymore on this. Yeah, so ageism definitely has an impact on your own self-ageism and on your own confidence.
So Anna, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the same. Internalized ageism definitely plays a role, but also externalized ageism plays a role. In my research stage of this project, we found a lot of examples of line managers not wanting to provide training to older adults because they were only going to work for a few more years. So we can see that ageism that pops out, not just from internally, but from the world around us. And we know that ageism is the commonly referred to as the most accepted form of discrimination. And it's present in learning and learning opportunities as well.
Talking about line managers potentially discriminating against older workers, Caroline brought up earlier in her presentation about businesses not being able to understand whether engaging their employees in learning actually is good for business and good for growth or productivity in their business. Andrew, you highlighted a few businesses internationally that are taking on board some sort of internal approaches to lifelong learning. I was wondering, you did mention that some of them haven't been evaluated, but whether you think that more businesses are understanding the importance of training their employees and the value that that brings.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. It's hard to get really put any hard statistics on that in a way beyond the statistics I showed you, for example, from PIAC, which shows the level of training. But that's obviously overall. It includes formal, informal, government provided, employer provided. But certainly in work that we're doing, we're seeing more and more companies starting to really take this on board, the importance of engaging with older workers. And I use the word older very, very loosely. I mean, there isn't any particular cutoff that we use at the OECD in response to that question from someone. And sorry, now I forgot what I was going to say. But with I mean, we've also done work at the OECD on just the business case for multi-generational workforces. So, I mean, I think, yeah, there might be some employers who don't fully understand or don't see the business case for this, but the business case is very clear in terms of retaining older workers, which helps lower average turnover, for example, because older workers just tend to be a bit more stable, and increases productivity. They can play a key role in leadership and mentoring, for example. So this idea that training older workers is a waste of time because they're going to leave, it just doesn't make sense. Because if you look at retention rates, right, retention rates for younger workers are actually really low, because younger workers, just it's a natural thing. They tend to move around more when you're younger, looking for a better match. So that whole argument just doesn't make any sense.
Thanks, Andrew. And sorry. That's right. I just wanted to loop back to Shani as a policy expert that's doing a lot of work in this space, and from hearing from a lot of the examples today and seeing what's in the report, whether there's a particular theme or key thing that you think the UK could really learn from other countries, or what we think the UK should be really focusing on to kind of take lifelong learning to the next step, not just for older workers, but for not for older people, but for all people.
Yeah, definitely. I feel as though that the government, so I'm placing a lot of emphasis on the government here, that they could definitely take more of a precedence here in this space. As we can see from all of the other sort of country examples, the government plays a huge part in promoting lifelong learning, whether that's through having specific agencies, whether that is through financial investment, whether that is through devolving funds to localized areas in order for them to actually spend where it's needed and to the people who need it. So I think it's more up to our policymakers and governments really to sort of set that tone for us. And also as well, I think the Department for Education and the Department for Business as well, to just be able to work a lot better together. This is not just such an isolated education problem. It's also an issue that we could take up with employers and those who work in lots of different sectors. So ensuring that there's a greater join up between those different departments, those two departments as well, to ensure that learning and skills is being really it's a joint effort, and I think they need to work closer together.
Absolutely, thank you. I think there's so much to do, but they all intertwine so closely, and without sort of having a leader, like you said, like the government, there's a risk of those falling over one another. So in the interest of time, we'll wrap up there today. I just wanted to thank you everyone for joining, and thank you in particular to our speakers, Shani, Chris, Caroline, Marie-Louise, June, Andrew and Anna. It's really been insightful, and I hope our participants today have found the discussion helpful. You can access the report now at the link on our screen, and participants will also be receiving an email later on today with a link to the report. Alongside today's webinar will also be posted on our program page. And for more news on this topic, you can always follow the program page, where we'll be updating as we go and as developments happen. You can also visit our website, ilc.uk.org.uk, join our mailing list and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at ILC UK. We hope to welcome you at another ILC webinar or event in the near future. I'd like to thank again Phoenix Insights and Shani and the team there for working with us on this report. And we hope everyone has a wonderful day and afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.